lost in the digital world, finding improved access through technology with linguistically diverse community. As we all know and see, since the COVID time, a lot of things has been changed. A lot of information have been changed from the traditional print material to go to the online, to the website. You can hear from the student that present during the lunchtime. You can see that they have to adapt and learn themselves about how to do Google Learning and how to create online Zoom and how to create an online account. So everything had been changed, but just keep in mind the digital world did not replace how we communicate with the LEP community. A lot of time, like my mom, I like to show my story. Like my mom, she still don't even know how to connect to her app or her using her phone. So digital could be a good supplement, but it's not always as a replacement of something that we communicate with people who do not speak English or even the English speaker, sometimes who lack of digital literacy on how to use the digital information. So for today, we have me. So you have to hear me all day. So from the beginning until the end. So you're gonna stay with me all day today. So I'm gonna moderate this panel, and we have three of our guest speaker, and I would like to invite themselves to introduce themselves. Let's start with Emily.
Hello, I'm Emily Yaffe. I am the Language Access Manager in the city of San Antonio, where they have a language access office that opened just over a year ago. And we have two staff members along with me who help support the work for language access. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the structure of that because I think it's so amazing to be in a city that has invested in language access work, and that's something that's growing in its how common it is, but it's not there all the time. And I'm also within the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Department. And so just by that title, it can give you a little bit of an idea about the intersectionality of this work and what it creates. Really glad to be here today. I've already learned so much from being at this conference and really appreciate the students' presentation today. I think that's it's so incredible to hear about like some of the things that we talk about and we share, but it being put into action in a way where it's people's lived experience is amazing.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peggy Liao, and I am with the City of Seattle Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, and I manage the Language Access Program. Myself, I moved from Taiwan to Seattle almost 10 years ago. I think having lived experience learning English and being an immigrant navigating different systems is a really good asset to be have the job right now. So day to day, I kind of imagine what I felt 10 years ago and really adapt that into the work that we do. And so with the City of Seattle, although this position is housed under the Immigrant Refugee Affairs, I do internally work very closely with our 33 departments. And I also manage another position, which is Language Services Coordinator. And so I will be talking a lot about, again, Emily mentioned the structure of our language access and also language services, how we leverage technology to solve challenges that we have in the digital world. And really happy to be here. And again, this morning, the student speakers and this morning's speaker really was inspiring, really reminded me how lucky I am to be able to do the work and think about people on a daily basis. So, thank you. That's me.
You got me here. You can laugh because in an English context, in English language, it's hard to say my name without that, so you're allowed that this one time here. My Korean name is actually a pretty common name, but in English accent, it's Won-suk-ya. Yeah. It's a little hard to grow up with that when you're in a multilingual space. But my Korean name, my given name is Yeo Won Seok, and I was born in Korea, and I came when I was 5 months old, and so I am what they call a 1.999999 generation. But I grew up with immigrant parents. I became naturalized on 9/11/2008. It was a very interesting time to be naturalized. But the first time I had to learn about translating some work was with my parents. My dad came for his graduate education. And as an 8-year-old, I remember reading his PhD writing. I didn't understand what was being said, but I understood the verbs and the nouns and where they're supposed to go in such order. But I also recognized that when I was born in Korea, moved to California, moved here to Hawaii, and I lived in Makiki. You know where that Keomoku Korean church is, the really big one, Christ United Methodist Church? I used to live there. I used to live on the campus before they rearranged everything. I grew up there in kindergarten and first grade and had an experience of being an Asian American for a moment. But in my second grade, we moved to a little town called Upland in California, where I was the only Korean student there. And so when I tried to explain who I was and where I was from, they first asked, so are you Chinese or Japanese? So, well, I'm from Korea. They said, where's that? Well, it's between the two. Oh, so you're both. And you hear Hawaii, it's a similar thing too. That's been the talk. Right now, I'm the pastor over at First United Methodist Church of Honolulu. But the reason why I'm connected here is because I was connected with Wei Lum during the pandemic time while I was at Harris United Methodist Church, which is over on Vineyard in Nu'uanu. And I was called and asked about conversations to help in translation with Japanese, except I don't speak Japanese. And then I was asked, well, what about my service in the Korean church because I'm Korean? I'm not serving in a Korean church. And then what about the Chukis, because we have so many ministries related to them, and the Micronesians and those who speak Ilocano and Tagalog? None of those. But then our conversation about technology came up about disseminating information effectively. And so I take it that's the only reason why I'm here, because I'm definitely not qualified to give a conversation. But part of the things I do in our church is that as I work at First United Methodist Church of Honolulu, we are sharing a ministry, and I'm there as an English minister, English language ministry pastor. We also have a Tongan ministry, and many people tend to ask that, is that the Tongan church there? Yes. Well, a good chunk it is. I'm also, for our connection of many United Methodist churches on the islands, I am the district chair on communications, and I am heading the conversation and communication and coordination with our international group called UMCOR, United Methodist Committee on Relief, with our response to Maui. I'm also in our island area, part of what we call the Acts of Repentance Task Force, which is to recognize those indigenous spaces we have been in, to recognize that we are on the land of the Kanaka Maoli, and to recognize that we may have done harm and missed the communication of aloha. And so it's my privilege to be here to be part of this conversation. Aloha maka.
Now I don't want to feel left out, so I'm gonna introduce myself more. Okay. As you know, my full name is Afira. People call me AP, so that's a short name. And people asking me, why not AB? Because your first name is A, your last name is B. So in the US, it should go with AB. I say, no, that is my mom, because she doesn't know how initial work. That she introduced me to the people as AP, because Thai people have a nickname, and my nickname is Api. So I make it AP. So that is the story of my nickname. And also I came here when I was 24, so older, do not speak English. And just luckily went to Kaimuki Adult School, start learning English, and try to get into law school. At first, didn't get accepted because my TOEFL score is not high enough because my English is not that good. But later on, still trying, and then got in law school, and now I'm here. And even that, I hope you can understand me with my accent. I just want to say that even for me, I went to law school. A lot of time, I still identify myself as the LEP, like a limited English proficiency. Like our keynote speaker said at the beginning, even the English speaking, when she has a PhD, when she go to in different sector, in different, profession, they go see the doctor, go see the lawyer. So she still do not understand their English because they are from different profession. So just imagine how that can affect the people who just speak English as a second language and have to navigate in the system. So but the reason I say that I'm LEP in certain situation because I'm a hybrid people. When you go see the doctor, I might say, the doctor, I need an interpreter. And they always say, oh, you're a lawyer, you don't need an interpreter. I know many people in this room hear that story many times because I only have one story. But I say, but it's true because being an LEP, it could be situational. It could be on this, where you are or what you are going through at that time. So that's my short story about me as a LEP and as son of immigrant, and now as a, I would say, ED of the Office of Language Access. But anyway, thank you everyone for being here today. So let's go to our session. And I know it's afternoon break. I didn't follow agenda. I just skip that a lot. Sometimes I think I work well with no script, but yeah. So because we're supposed to start with icebreaker, followed by the introduction, I just skip it. So I just have my panelists introduce themselves. So now we're gonna go back to the first thing on the agenda, icebreaker for the Reverend Ron.
All right, so this is fully interactive. I suggest if you have a phone, you can start using it because some of you have been through this before. I have to first ask, how many of you are immigrants yourselves? Okay. How many of you are children of immigrants? How many of you are far removed from immigration from your family line? Thank you for being here. We're going to go through a little experience, perhaps, of what many of you have already gone through or you know other people are. Because for me, at this point, I may not be able to translate everything for people. I've had situations where someone asks me if there are translations. I had to be able to research this to someone else. So we're going to do this exercise. You're going to see a statement on the screen. Please do your best to fulfill that statement. And I'm going to give you a full minute to figure yourselves out. Y'all ready to go? Here we Y'all have 20 seconds. Three, two. All right, for those of you who figured it out, generally, what does it say? That's right. Clap 3 times and wish the person next to you happy birthday. So some of you may have heard some clapping. And you went, what's going on? Do I clap too? And some of you may have heard other people say happy birthday and go, it's not my birthday today. And if it is your birthday, you go, how did you know? Okay, so here are some questions for you. So who first recognized what language it was? And show me by your hands. Okay, so you understood, you generally knew, and I didn't realize because I'm a little ignorant here, apparently many of you know that the circle is how you can tell it's Korean, right? So we saw a lot of hands go up. We recognize the language, but not everyone is confident. There are some people whose hands were still down. Here's another question. Who recognized the prompt of what it said? Do you have any Korean speakers, Korean readers here? We have one hand that went up over there. There's a ratio thing here going on for Korean speakers. So there's 2 of us who can actually understand the prompt when reading it. But if not, who recognized any localized translators? Well, I take it by no hands raised. We couldn't figure out who would be a localized translator. There's no one around us in our tables where we could ask, are you Korean? Do you understand Korean? Do your children listen to enough K-pop? That's a whole other thing. So if not, if we don't have localized translators, who offered a translation? You had someone who offered. How did you find that translation? I saw you, but how did you? Use Google. How many of you, by raising your hand, use Google Translate with the photo option? You knew that you could use it. How many of you never knew that and you're going to use it from now on? There we go. This is a great use of technology. I used this when I was traveling Japan to see different signs. And I used it in Korea. I could read Korean, but just in case. So some of us know of this tool, some of us don't. And how immediate it is. So now you're going to go home and download Google Translate, and then you're going to find out how amazing this thing is. But how many of you just tried to do it and just copied other people to see if that worked? Okay, so most of you are very confident knowing what you can and cannot do. This is my experience when working with those who have language barriers. Especially when coming to the United States, the first issue is, what language are we supposed to speak in and hear? And the blanket statement is English. But how many of you learned English from an English standpoint, from an English natural speaking place? As a Korean American growing up, I heard that for most Koreans, the way that they learn English for their statements was, I am a boy, you are a girl. With that kind of accent. And the accent that they learned from whatever English is, it stuck to that accent. So when they came to the United States and they hear English, it's not the English they learned back at home. So that was one of the challenges. Do I recognize this language? Are they even speaking English? This is the first question I get when I'm sitting next to those where English is not their first language. And even if it was English, who would recognize that it was a prompt, it was a direction? The only reason why you knew it was a direction is because I said so. But how many people who, when they are looking for services or going to government spaces, do they know which one is the prompt out of the wall of signs? And then who would they find to translate? How many of you were the children who were translating for your parents or your uncle and aunt? I have a little less hands here. You're the one to translate those words and the meaning behind it. And if you didn't understand it, hopefully you can have a dictionary around you. And when I grew up, there was no smartphone, so I was carrying around a Webster's dictionary every once in a while. Just to understand how to figure out how to help my parents. And even then, do we know who offers translation? And I take it in this conference, we're reminding people we have a resource in which people can get translations. But in that moment of stress, where are they? In that moment? Or do we just copy other people? One challenge I had when I came to Hawaii was when I was working in a non-Korean church, and yet we had Korean immigrants in our church who saw my agency and my language. And so she was going through a legal battle and asked me to come along with her. I don't know legal jargon in Korean. I'm conversational. I can speak English and I understand English. But this was a dispute over a property in which she had been, her title had been taken away by some other means. And they were fined for legal battles between her, the person who was staying in that property, and a third party who was not present, who made that signature possible. This Korean person didn't know how to translate what was going on, and it was court date. The next day, she just let me know. And as a pastor, that happens a lot. We get to know the day before, or maybe 30 minutes before, we just have to show up. We go. And there I went in full faith to go support this person, not as a legal expert, but in some sort of support. And at some point, I didn't realize you could do this. They were auctioning off the property. They came out of the court, started talking about the figures going up. They're confused about what the process is. I'm confused about what the process is. I don't know who to turn to. It's too late to call for a translator at this point, and we're stuck. The hope is that we would have resources where people can go to across all of our websites, for all of our resources. And I was going to use this as an example, but AP is so good. When I went to the main office of Language Access webpage, when I was pulling on my mobile phone, I scrolled down. On the computer, you could see all the languages there, but I couldn't see Korean. And I knew it was there, but in the mobile space, Korean was over here, and I couldn't scroll for it. I couldn't get on it. AP fixed it, though. Thank you. So now Korean can get there. but every site needs that. And we've come to learn that every web page, every service is on their own independent web designer for most of it. I can't solve this problem, I'm just letting you know this exists. But how can we make it a systematic shift that we can make it easy for anyone who's speaking a different language, who can go to a common place to know a familiar space, to know this is where I might be able to go and get information. All the other examples I had, Deborah already said, so brief, I have to. I'm a preacher. But keep that in mind.
Take me back to at the beginning that when Reverend Warren said that, oh, you seem like you're not fit here because we talk about language access, language. But your perspective is really important because we know what we know, we do what we do. Sometimes we need to hear from the user. Pastor Juan is the one who work on the ground, working with the people who our user who go to our website using the tool, using information to share with his member. So without him, it's just I think it's just a clear sample that without him calling me and telling AP your website it's not working. It doesn't compatible. It doesn't show the language that his member cannot see it. For me, like I say, I don't say that it could be some ignorance, but we need this type of voice. We need this type of people. We need the community to help us to improve ourselves. Like I say at the beginning, there is a lot of things that we need to learn, and we need to learn together from each other. Like I say, I know what I know. I know how to do certain things. I don't know everything. Even though I've been here for 7 years, still learn things every day. And that's it. And then when we talk about one thing I want to add it to, when we talk about digital world, a lot of people are just thinking just about the website. Website is one way of communication that you get information, but I can see people when Pastor Juan just showed the Korean one, people just grab the phone, just start looking, using the, what they call the video app. I don't have that before, so I'm gonna use that too. So that part of digital world, people are using that. It's not just the website. It's just all the tool, all the app that in this environment, in this current world, people are using it. So we talk about chatbot, that now when we talking people chatbot, I just learned the other day that my Xerox machine can translate something that they can, what they call, install some software. So when we talk about digital world, it's not just about website. It's everything that surrounds that. Everything that we go to the kiosk, get something, it's about computer. So it's more than just the website. I just want to make sure people understand. But today, start something small and thing that we try. I mean, one thing that I learned from Pastor Juan that what is challenge? What we have seen as the provider as well as the government agency in trying to implementing and incorporating digital world, digital access into our work or our language access. So this is some challenge that I have been asking around as well as the people who answer. So I think that's one thing about this year conference. We're asking people to posing some question when you register. So because we want to gather information from you and helping us shape and form what type of question we can ask our panel. So this is the basic question that we have, and I'm gonna pose it to my panelists who are here that's gonna take over from my part. Because the challenging that I have first, can we use translation software for easy access? I know sometimes we just, not just sometimes, just today, evidently everyone just have Google phone. But looking at our population, looking at our demographic, Google doesn't have any, cannot translate Chukis, cannot translate Mashti. I think they do Tongan, yeah? No Tongan. So a lot of people who live in our state, even though technology, that granted it is good, it's reliable, but it's still not equipped with the people, with our people, with our demographic. So the tool is useful, but is it compatible? Is that available for our population? That's one thing that you have to keep in mind. then can we use the software translation for easy access? That one thing. I have a story, and Pat can laugh that because during the COVID time, the machine translation, the Google translation translated wrong drug at the longevity medicine. And another story that I used to do immigration law, used to be immigration lawyer. One time, I have an immigrant client go to the website with me, and you remember, you all know that when you go to the website, sometimes we want to go to the home page, say go back home, and it translates really go back home. So making immigrant, if you think about it, if they are undocumented, the one that is working is undocumented, they say they don't want to press that button because it told me go back home. So the way it's something it could do more harm than good. People stop looking for the services, stop looking for the use of technology because they do not understand. Because sometimes machine is machine. They just do things on their own. So there's a literal translation. The meaning is not there. Another sample the other day. So Carrie might laughing at me. We have one document that use the word "you are covered." So they're referring to what they call insurance coverage. But the translation come out, you are covered. That means, are you under the building? Because I mean, that has cover because you're not exposing to the sun, not exposing to anything. So otherwise, why the tool is good, but can we just use it for easy access? So I'm going to posing to the group. And also, how should we organize the language selector? That's really important because we see a lot of different things. When we talk about language selector, maybe some of you might not aware or might not know what I'm talking about because there are too many options. Some, I don't have picture here, so it's my bad, but some website, they just put a tab at the top looking, so say Chuki Chinese Machine. Some website or some information, they use like a drop down, like a Google drop down menu. Some people use at the bottom, on the left, on the right, so there is no standard. So I just want to pose to my panel, how should we organize the language selector? And how we organize in language or using language alphabet or we using non-language alphabet. So, and say, Reverend Warren talk about one, my website is not compatible with mobile device. How we fix it, because sometimes we just know what we know. We have not heard anything from the third party until he called me and he wanted to give to you that a sample today, but I fixed it, so sorry about that. And also another number 4 question, do we need to translate the entire website to match the English version? Because some people want to create what they call parallel website, English and non-English. Is that thing that we are aiming for, or how we can incorporate or reconcile the need of LEP as well as the need of the government agency that try to create a website. One thing that I always talking, you have to think like LEP. You don't think for LEP. Because a lot of time people think this is good for you, this is good for them, or they should know this, they should know that. But think like yourself if you're in a situation that where you need to get information, what is enough? What do you need to know? Get to the point. Sometimes just a phone number that they need to know. They don't need to know a lot of things because they're gonna call you anyway. So even though you put down too many things, so it doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. And the last one that we have it here, we update and add more information very frequently. Like some people added news release every day or every 3 days. And we know when we do translation, it takes time, it takes more than that. Sometimes we take 5 days, 7 days, or even we use machine translation software. How we can keep update, or how can we keep up with the updating that we put on the website, and how do we manage in the translation? So this is kind of the highlight of the question and challenge that we have correct and record from the people who register as well as from my real life experience that I want to post it to my panelists to help me. Learning from you, let's say Hawaii is 2,000 miles away from the closest one. So we want to learn from people. And I don't like to say this, but I say that sometimes people like to hear from someone else instead of their own people. So now we have people from mainland to share their perspective. So let's hear what they have to share with us. So let's start with Peggy.
Can I share a comment as you go up? One of the things that we're mindful of in our conversations is that I think you all agree. We're doing this for the sake of human dignity. It's that people have dignity as they have access. So as you hear today's conversation, everything that Peggy will be sharing, maybe open to hear all. Closer to.
So this is a story about cat. Well, I will respond to AP's questions with a story, kind of tell you how I landed here, and also just share with you what the structure that I started for the city of Seattle. So I took this job as a language access manager about 4 years ago with the city of Seattle. I have no government experience prior to that, and I was also not a language access expert. And so I kind of set up my journey to learn from other people. And I also was figuring out and then wondering, okay, so language access, language services, that means interpretation, translation. And when it comes to translation, how do people manage translation? Vendors, how do translation companies manage translation? How do other cities manage translation? So I started to learn from other people and had conversation with vendors, and then started to learn about, oh my God, there are a world of technology solutions that are already out there. But from what I can see, within the city of Seattle, 33 departments, no one has heard of that. No one is using that. No one is, like, I have comments from other colleagues said to me that translation is too difficult and I know too little about that. So in order to not make any mistake, I would not do that. So translation was perceived internally with the city as no one has figured it out. And so when I learned about other technology, I started to learn about CAT tools, TMS, machine translation, translation memory, those kind of terms that are used in the industry. And then people had figured out solutions to manage their internal translation workflow and processes. So CAT tool stands for Computer Assisted Translation Tool. And a TMS is a translation management system that Google, Amazon, other tech companies, and other big agencies that they use to really move translation and files around from their content management system to their website to their blog. So I ask, can the city of Seattle adopt a cat? Can we get a cat? The answer is yes, we now have a cat, a very smart cat. So what this smart cat does, it also took me a long time to really figure out what my structure wants. So basically that means before we went on this path, translation was very decentralized. 33 departments, they can do their own thing, ask bilingual staff to translate, ask a translation agency to translate, a community-based organization, or ask their bilingual neighbors to translate. No one really know how to do. Now we have a centralized system with a CAT tool and a translation management system that we use to manage our workflow. We also work with local translators who are our contractors to make sure that our translation has that cultural relevancy and also consistency throughout our 33 departments. So that system is streamlined and centralized. Using this technology, we cut down our turnaround time So from I have to manually send emails and files out to, and we work with a system with translator and editor for every single project, for every single language. And at the minimum, we translate into around 7 languages for every single project. So that's 14 people for maybe 3 documents per project. So that's a lot of files to manage. All of that can be centralized using some sort of software out there. And so that shortened or turnaround time, that also is because everything is cloud-based, is this on the internet. Every department, any city employee with a city email address can access this system. So I don't have to email them or they don't have to call me. They can just get on this software to get the things done. So it's extremely one-stop shop and everything is centralized. With the beauty of a CAT tool or a translation management system, you can save your translated content into a single database that can be reused by other channels, other communication, and that can also be shared across different departments. So when it comes to saving money, saving time, then again, that software system can help you get there. It also helps us make payment to translators, and we work with local translators. They are also immigrant, they care about the community. Another big piece that we decide to centralize our translation system is because of plain language. Before this centralizing system, I did not have visibility into what Department of Transportation is sending out, Department of Education, what they're communicating about. Now I can say, hey, these are my recommendations for you to simplify your English before everything is sent out to translate, because your translation is only as good as your English content. And then with this system, then you can think about how I can move files in the backend for your online digital services. And with a lot of API connectors or other solutions, it's very easy for you to, without emailing your files, to directly renew and update that ever-changing information that you will put on your website and or blog post. So this is a system that we now have. Clients are happy, so departments, people, they're really happy. People said to me that, Peggy, your system is the best I've ever seen in the city. With our hundreds of systems out there, it's the most straightforward. So our clients are happy. We also reduce that turnaround time from 2 hours to as short as 1 day. And so it's also really increase that access, making sure that people have updated information as quickly as possible. Yeah, so should I go into the next slide? Transition into other tips for digital engagement. So as AP mentioned, it's very important to hear from our users. So the first thing when it comes to any type of engagement, either in person or online, the first thing really to consider is your user's experience. Test before it got published for desktop, review, or for mobile. If you just simply pull out your phone when you're designing it, you will see, yes, Korean is not on the screen. Secondly, you provide and offer language services. Jody mentioned that there are 120 languages spoken in the city. We have 150. So how do you diverse different way of communication? People might not want to read everything online, so if you can throw out a phone number out there as quickly as possible for people to call you, and also let them know that interpretation is available when you're communicating with them online. that is something you can diversify and then proactively offer language services and also make that language selector as obvious as possible. I think city of Boston or city of New York, they make it the first thing on their city website. It's like for everybody to encounter no matter of your language preference. So if that's the first thing you encounter, it's very easy for you to select the language. Someone is calling you. Please ignore. It's very easy for people to know that you want me to pick my language first, and then they proceed with the in-language experience. Thirdly, we talk about Google Translate, we talk about ChatGPT. I actually love AI. I think if we use it in a smart way, it can be our good friend. And the first thing to do if you're considering using machine translation is to make your content machine translation friendly. Me as a Chinese reader, a lot of times when I'm reviewing English content, the first thing I would do is just pull everything, put it in Google Translate, review it in Chinese, and then see where the translation got wrong. That's a pretty good indicator where you can then further simplify the English content or rewrite it, rephrase it. Maybe there's an acronym, your jargon is there. You talk about traffic jam instead of traffic congestion. So it's a fruit jam that you get in the translation. So if you do read a different language, make sure that it's machine translation friendly. And then reviewed what's being machine translated. We are advised, and it's a recommend approach to not use machine translation alone. You can use it. A lot of translators use it as the first step, but everything should be reviewed and then revised for the context for what is actually being communicated. And then I talk about CAT tool. If you're thinking about getting a CAT tool to manage your translation internally or to move your files more efficiently to save time and make it more economical, don't just jump right into, okay, let me research what's out there. Because all of the features are out there, you don't want to change your system and structures based on what's out there, what's new, what's fancy. It's not that approach. It should be the other way around to figure out, okay, who's the translator I want to work with? Do I hire them in as state employees, or I work with contractors, or I work with a bigger translation company who can handle my translation with more human resources. And when it comes to managing your website or managing your different digital engagement, do you have IT support? What about your procurement team? Who is out there who can help you manage and maintain your system? And then what's your timeline, etc. So really figure out what you want to do before jump right into figure out what's the translation technology you can apply. That's from me. Thank you.
So if you asked me 3 years ago when we're talking about AI, I would say no. But now because the time has been changed, and I know last month when we have an SPI summit here, I heard clearly from the chair that because the one of discussion people talking, should we use it or how we, that's it. It's not a question about should we use it. It's gonna be the question how we use it because AI is coming. They're not gonna get away, so we have some resistance. Yeah, but it's not how it works. It's gonna be here. It's gonna be there, and it's just a matter how we manage it and how we use it. It's not just should we use it. So next one, we're gonna hear from Emily what he have to share with us. So.
So a lot of what I want to share with you guys about is technology and user experience, and hopefully avoiding situations of where we're putting too much technology in front of our clients, our residents, our newcomers, our folks who are linguistically diverse, who we have great services that we want to provide access to. And so I'm going to actually go back so I can look at, or maybe not, it was wishful thinking. I'll go up there.
The technology sometimes is not friendly.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. I think that's really important when we talk about technology, that we reduce the separation between us and people. A lot of times at the City of San Antonio, when I hear people talking about technology and this new thing that I've heard of, it's often a desire to adopt something that they hope creates better connections, but in reality is more of a separation between them and the resident. I think technology is great when we're thinking about how we do things internally and how it affects our use internally, but can act as an additional barrier when we consider that there's a digital divide, language divide, of course, and there's people's like comfort level with these sort of things. Okay. And so I'll give an example from San Antonio right now, and this is kind of like the am I sure about technology sort of conversation. So we have 311 service. Is there a 311 in Hawaii? So it's the information hotline. 211. Okay, 211. So is that provided through the United Way? Okay. So 311 is very much like 211, but it's focused on just city and county services. And so in San Antonio and in a lot of other places, you can dial 311 and it'll connect you with a city service to answer your question. And what I really love to tell people about 311 is it's like, if you think that it could possibly be a government service, go ahead and call 311 and ask them the question. And if it's not theirs, they'll redirect you rather than trying to do the research yourself. So in San Antonio, just recently, they adopted artificial intelligence. Thank you. They adopted artificial intelligence to answer 311 calls, mainly because they didn't have enough operators for the system, and so there were wait times. And I was really concerned. I helped them work on the translation process because our primary language, other than English, is Spanish. So I helped them work on translating the prompts for the AI to use. But I shared my concerns over and over again because I know that when I call a service and I get a machine on the phone, I get worried, and I think that there's no way that I'm going to get the help that I need. And sometimes I'm just way too frustrated that I just start saying operator, operator, operator over again in the hopes that it'll just help me bypass the system. But they really needed to try it out. So we just got back some data recently, and I'm sorry that I don't have that to show to you today. And it may have proved me somewhat wrong, and it's still to be seen. And what they found was that thousands more of their calls that usually ended up in a hang-up before they got to a response of some sort resulted in them getting a response. We don't know if it was a helpful response, but it resulted in them getting a response before the hang-up occurred. And I'm waiting to see what those results were in Spanish. So when I talk about that separation between us and technology, that was a barrier separation, and I hope that we get feedback on that. Okay, so we're back in here. So I really like the CAT tool that Peggy was sharing about because it gives a great example of technology that's used internally to improve services, but it's not necessarily something that creates a barrier for our residents or that faces our residents. Another thing that I really like about this technology is you could even make the argument that it gives us a better connection to our local residents because Peggy's translators are local translators for the most part, entirely. which is not entirely.
For some languages, Seattle.
Yeah. So for some languages it might be harder, but I love that there's this connection with local translators. And the importance of local translators is they understand the things that are facing your residents. So they have an idea of maybe what you're talking about in your government language. They have an idea about that street name and where it's at and how confusing that might be. Something that your translators who are in other places may not understand as well, and they're able to provide you with a higher quality translation. Your local translators also may be learning about a service that they know is valuable to their neighbor, and they may share that with their neighbor. In addition to that, your local translator may translate something in a way that your local resident may not agree with, and they might complain about that translation. And I love translation complaints because I think they should all be treated as engagement. So if somebody is able to take the time and make a connection with you and can complain about something, they must trust you to complain about it in the first place. And so you can use that as a point of engagement with them. So you can say thank you for their feedback. You can provide them with additional information that they can then disseminate in their community. And then on top of that, you can have a conversation with your local translator about, hey, we learned something. We think we can improve our translation in this way. We heard that it was too formal. It's a complaint that I often get in San Antonio. Our translations are too formal, and we can improve things from there. So I wanted to share with you guys a little bit about ways that we think about user design in our translation. So this is 2 screenshots from the City of San Antonio's Neighborhood and Housing Services Office. And they're doing a lot of work around tenants' rights. And so they really want to inform the community about their rights. They heard a lot from community members that they're having bad relationships with their landlord, they didn't understand the leases that they were signed, or that they were concerned that their landlord was maybe asking them to do something or making a requirement of them that was not included in their lease. So they've put a lot of effort into translation of tenants' rights. So one of the things that I want to bring up with this is that tenants' rights, to me, strikes me as a term that not everybody may be familiar with. Maybe something that you know that you need help, you know that you are a tenant, you may not use the word tenant, and so who's going to be the person that has access to this information? Our main user, the people who often go to our websites as government agencies, isn't always the end user. I would say oftentimes it isn't the end user. And so we can create websites with 2 users in mind. We can create it for the people who we hope that this information gets to in the end. And we can also create it in the hopes that our trusted organizations, our community partners, our churches, our parents groups, our school systems, how can this information be the most useful to them? And I would like to think that this is approaching that design of that this is very helpful to who's the people who are actually going to arrive at our website that may understand that, oh, this person needs assistance with tenants' rights, even though they don't know that they need assistance with tenants' rights. So what they did was they created a language library, and this language library is accessible on their tenants' rights page. And they have other languages and a logo that's there. And so you've got like a little bit of building recognition through that. Something that my office is going to be working on is a San Antonio language logo, something that we can build visual recognition for. And so we'll see updates from there. And then if you click on other languages, you get a drop-down menu for Notice for Tenants' Rights. And what I like that they did here is they had the name of the language in language and in English. And so this helps both users navigate it. So Espanol and Spanish, so that if the organization perhaps didn't speak Spanish, they would be able to find that and help somebody navigate to it, or they would be able to reshare it on their own. Even better is I would love to have the titles translated into each language. So it would say Notice of Tenants' Rights in language, and then there would be Spanish in parentheses, or Español in Spanish in parentheses. So the next example that I have of the use of technology is QR codes, and so this is not a government example, as you may have guessed. But on the screen, I have a screenshot of directions for making gummy candies. I think they're called Poppin' or something like that. It's a candy brand where they give you a bunch of powders and these little molds, and you pour the powder and the water into the little molds, and you make these gummy candies that look in the shape of sushi or hamburgers and all sorts of like funny things. And I got really excited when I saw this for the first time, because I wanted to make the candy that was fun, but then I saw this QR translator on the back. So we have visual directions, we have plain language directions, and then we also have access to translation all in one space. So I bought this at a Korean grocery store in Charlotte. It's a really great grocery store. And I was thinking, like, this is such a great thing. They don't always know what to expect for language, or how easy it will be to make sure that they have all the languages placed there in the time that it's needed. That's a challenge that we have as well in government. We may know of trusted places to place our documents, our printed documents, but we don't always know if the person who needs it in that specific language is going to be able to receive it at that time. And so QR codes, it's a barrier. Not everybody knows how to use them, but hopefully we provide enough visual cues that it can be learned. And then as we go out and we show people about these things, because we want to reduce the separation between us and residents, so we will still want to go out and meet with community, maybe we can show them about these resources and build recognition. The candy's it doesn't taste that great, by the way. It's fun to make. And so this is a design that we're going to be receiving feedback on in San Antonio. So we have a group of a task force that I'm forming for our top languages. And the idea is that, can we build recognition for a logo? Does this mean something to you? What would you like to see on it? So we'll be receiving feedback on that. Can we make it clear that there's something provided here in your language? And then will this QR code help you access it? And so I'm imagining that we would have these brochures out there in these key places, and that these QR codes would help you get access to the translation that you needed, and hopefully even like build that recognition and that welcoming that, yes, the city wants to be able to communicate with you in your language. And so that's all I really had there. And so I have a couple notes that I was taking while my colleagues were presenting. I want to give another example of technology and user experience that came up in San Antonio recently. So I'm brand new to San Antonio. I've only lived there for a year. So there's a lot of street names and corridors and things like that that are very unfamiliar to me. And they had a invite that went out. It said, Wurzbach Corridor Sidewalk Project Town Hall. And they went and they got this translated. It doesn't mean anything to me in English. It did mean something in English to the people who'd been living in that area for a long time. And they used a translation provider who I think is using machine translation. And so it translated it somewhat correctly, but nobody showed up to the meeting. I mean, there's some English speakers that showed up to the meeting because they knew what it was talking about, but we didn't. We had Pashto and Arabic translation because we knew that was an area that had a high instance of that. And so nobody was there that needed that interpretation service. I'm sorry, nobody was there that needed that interpretation service. And luckily I work in a city with a lot of amazing people, and they didn't take that to mean that it wasn't needed or that it wasn't wanted or that that was money that was poorly invested. That wasn't the mindset that they went into. But it did allow us to have a larger conversation about how do you make sure that people receive information in the way that they need it. So how do you use plain language? How do you answer the questions that people have? If we are going to put things into machine translation, if that is going to be the resource that we use, and I think that on things like websites, sometimes it becomes a necessity. How are you expressing things in a way that means something to people who haven't been sitting there and working on this day in, day out, and so know what the Wurzbach corridor is, know what a town hall is, and know that you have the right to talk to somebody about your sidewalks and how you want to be able to move around in your community. And I think that's the biggest part. So a lot of people may not know that they have the right to say, I have needs and I need to be able to move around in this way. Maybe we can move into a conversation or see if there's any questions.
I noticed one thing people might have some question in their mind when they're looking at, are we talking about translation here? Why a lot of things about translation? Because the fundamental of dissemination of information through the digital access or digital platform is start from the translation. That's why we're looking what is the best way to convert, what is the tool, what is available is out there, because that's what we need to converting from one language to another language. So, like say, language is very diverse, like us here in this room, but the platform is just me one way. So we're looking at it, for example, just here, we have Romanized, non-Romanized, something is English, something is non-English. Is the platform that you have is supporting or not? Another thing that I can say that the other day long time ago, I have a conversation with a Chinese-speaking person that tried to apply for benefit online. So they really good at what they call computer. So at the first step that they want to say, please create your password. And I know we want to have some security, so you have to have one capital, one small, one symbol, one number. So when we talk about something like Chinese, there is no such thing as a capital. So they cannot even go for the first step to create their own password to access or to apply for benefit. So something like that is just the way that we have to start at the beginning. When we start thinking about how to decide, how to understand how the language works, what type of your demographic, what type of people or what language you are working with, and looking at the system that's supporting what you're trying to do. So like I said at the beginning, the language access should not be afterthought, because when you spend $1 million on creating the system, but now you just find out that the system did not support or cannot incorporate something that's serving your people. So why one objective of this panel is just kind of sparking conversation, sparking an idea to think how we can incorporate language, because like I say, AI is coming. We're going to use it anyway. How we prepare ourselves, how we prepare our population. And another thing that I posted, where we should put language selector, how we do that, because we, as an advocate, we try to educate to LEP individual. If we have some standard, if we know where to put things, if we know we come to agree upon, when we going out there into the community, we can just say that, you know what, when you go on the website, just looking at the upper corner right, you will see the symbol, you will see the tab, you will see the drop down. So it could create unifying messages that we can use across the country, across the nation to educating people. So like, I just want to use this platform, just sparking conversation. I cannot do it alone. That's why we have you here. And I believe and I know you care. That's why you're here with me today. So just start talking, start a conversation within your department, how we, all of us, can help improving communication to our LEP population. But I know we still have some time. Before I go to the question, there's gonna have any comment from the panelists that you want to add on?
I just wanted to say, because you brought up language selectors again, and where's the right place to locate it, and how do we list the languages? And I think that there's something important to recognize here, in that we're not going to be able to reach perfection in this. There's always going to be room for improvement, and I think striving to seek out that room for improvement is really like a great goal to have. So I like seeing the name of the language in its language. I like seeing not 20 or 30 different languages present because it becomes overwhelming to people. But I also know that if you just focus on your top languages, you miss out on languages that maybe have a smaller presence in your community, but have just as of a need and maybe have harder access to information, especially when that information is needed in an emergency. And so having conversations with people is essential.
Well, I want to add that people pull out your phone when you try to navigate what that is, right? So a lot of users are already have Google Translate as an add-on extension for their browser. So automatically they're reviewing the content in Google Translate in their language. So it's kind of essentially bypass the language selector step when they're using it. And so I think acknowledging that, and so that's where testing comes in really handy to really see how people use it, how people navigate, and if our conversations still stop here, like we don't know where to put the selector, and then we cannot really move forward, I think that kind of missed the opportunity as well.
On the same note, some of you may have noticed that when you go on websites, the first thing that pops up is the cookies warning. Cookies are generally supposed to be helpful, that when you start going through the website, it saves some of your settings, so when you come back to it, it's easy to use. One of those great benefits is if there's a cookie for which language did you select. So when that person comes back to that same browser, it'd be easier. Except it's a lot of English, and it's really scary. I take it from many of you who are helping other people, especially when they're navigating through some of these things, is to be helpful to know, as AP has been suggesting, what would be the convenient, consistent place that people can go to. And in my position, I'm not the one who needs a translation, but I'm always the person who's teaching someone else to get their translation. And so having the both English and the native language, the benefit of it is not just for the person who needs a language, but the person who's helping them get there. So as you design your websites, think about not just the person who needs it at the end, because they do, but there's a fear factor of how to get there. There's gonna be someone else who's gonna be willing to help them, at least for the first steps. So consider those English persons who may be sitting next to the person who needs a language access. What would help them also to navigate familiarly? Oh, this might be where you have to go. Because if you start with just the pure language, just one language at the top, as soon as it all translates, the person who's helping them can no longer help. Now, it does get overwhelming. And I really like what the old, how many of you remember Palm Pilots? Am I aging myself here? The great thing about that CEO that Steve Jobs took on afterward was no more than 3 steps. Any more than 3 steps to get to what you want to, it's overwhelming. It's too complicated. And already the fear and anxiety is already there. That's it.
Sorry. And we at the time we end out this panel, but I just want on our screen to show that during this Maui Wi-Fi, OLA has been, because we have heard from people from the community that we need help that they can go get to translation of the information in different languages. So we're working with the community, so we try to put everything together. So we created a web page that by all the information in the language. For example, when I click Tagalog, that we have a lot of information. But I just want urging you who are working at the department, the information that we have here is still very limited. It's not enough for people to get information for what type of services that is available. So I urging you to go back to your department, looking is there any information, any vital information that could be useful for the people who was impacted by the population, just considering translating something, doing something to share with people. And I just have a conversation with FEMA. They even offer to translate something short and concise for us. So when people are talking about resource, now FEMA step in and helping the state in doing it. It's just our job, our responsibility, because they are not content creator. They don't know how we run the program. So each agency, each department is the one who have that information. just share that information. If you want to contact, feel free to contact me, and then I'm more than happy to coordinating you with the FEMA so we can have more information to serve our LEP population. So this one is my website is simple. I don't know how to do fancy thing, but it get the work done. So it's not a showcase something, but it just say that now it's time for us to work together. I cannot do it alone again. I say it again. I cannot do it alone. I need all your help.